Ready? Ready? Good morning, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Fort Myers Beach Local Planning Agency. It's Tuesday, May 9th, 2023. It's 9 a.m. All members of the planning agency are present except for Don Sudduth, who will be coming in at any minute. He's stuck in traffic. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In times of uncertainty and despair, let us inspire courage. With trust in one another and dedication, is there all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone disapprove? Okay, so the minutes pass unanimously. Jane?
Just want to move the section A under public comment down to public hearing. That's supposed to be a part of that. And we'll just re-alphabetize after that.
Okay,
Have side setbacks as A.
okay.
Thank you.
Let the record reflect that, Dawn, was that you parking? Did you hit the building?
There was a big bang.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Don Sudduth is here. Okay, so we're moving the side setback amendment down into the public hearings. I'm looking. Could I just have a show of hands? I like to get people who are here up front.
Right.
So, is anyone here for the side setback amendment discussion? You two gentlemen. Okay. And what about the discussion for setbacks in houses and primarily non-residential areas? Okay. And how about the dock boat ramp amendments? Okay. The TPIFMB, I see you all. No one here yet, or anyone here yet for Old Seaport?
Yeah.
Great. Jim? When did we get so old? I'm looking at you going, that's Jim. He's supposed to have dark hair. It's nice to see you, Jim.
That was
Okay.
horrible, Anita.
Well, I'm looking at him going, I know him, it's Jim, but without dark hair. Sorry about that, Jim. Okay, so there's Old Seaport. All right, so the first item on the agenda, we're gonna move with no objection from anyone. We'll move the items that were A and B down and take the side setback amendments first. Sarah? That wasn't very politically correct.
No, it wasn't.
I'm just looking, I'm going, oh yeah, okay.
Is this on? Oh, good. Good morning, Sarah Probst with Community Development. At the April LPA hearing, the LPA asked staff to bring code language to town council to allow the construction of rectangular homes on parallelogram lots, allowing front and rear encroachment into the setback up to 8 feet. The LPA also asked staff to develop language to allow a 5-foot setback for lots less than 50 feet in width. During the meeting, the LPA asked that staff contact the fire department to ensure that they had no concerns with decreasing the allowed setback. A conversation with the fire official raised the issue of fire flow. The fire official said that it would be important to ensure that when these homes are constructed, that the fire hydrants are tested to ensure they have adequate fire flow. Following this response from the fire department, staff reached out to the building official to ensure that there were no additional requirements in the building code. The building code does not allow overhangs to project closer than 40 inches to the property line and requires additional fire rating for combustible eaves closer than 5 feet to a property line. Will essentially require houses with a 5-foot side setback to have different overhang regulations and have different additional requirements. Because of the concerns raised by the fire department and the building department, staff felt it was important to return this item to get the LPA to get feedback. Additionally, staff wanted to provide the code that was previously amended that eliminated the 5-foot setback for non-conforming lots. For the RC zoning district, this means a lot less than 45 feet wide, and for RS or RM zone lots, it's 75 feet wide. Staff asks that the LPA discuss the issues raised and provide feedback for the preferred course.
Thank you, Sarah. Is there any questions? Are there any questions for Sarah?
Good
Patrick?
question. The mention of fire flow, my understanding is setback of 5 feet or 3 feet or 7 feet. Fire flow is still an issue that we have to make sure we comply with.
We'd have to ensure that there was additional fire flow, that there would just be additional testing that they would want to make sure, just
Okay.
because of the closeness of the houses and the ability for fire to jump. So
Okay.
Could I ask, I'd like to ask a question.
Mhm.
Is there do you have to have a higher standard for fire flow if the houses are closer?
that's what that's what the fire official had indicated.
So is there a way of checking these neighborhoods? There's several streets in question. Can they be checked in advance?
Yeah, we would need to do fire flow testing, and that can be part of this decision, but I didn't want it to come forward alone because there would be additional requirements for the plans reviewers, as well as making sure that the fire flow was adequate along all those streets.
Sarah, who does that? The town or the fire department?
I couldn't tell you if the fire department, in most communities, the fire department does it. In some communities, the fire department watches,
Mhm.
and another person has to be hired to do the actual test.
Water
Okay.
company usually does it in the fire department.
The water
Involved.
company?
That's where the flow is coming from, the
Mhm.
pressure in the line.
Okay.
But the
So that
fire-
would then put the responsibility with that, if that falls true, then the responsibility would fall on the town.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Sarah? Doug?
These, the streets in question with the diagonal lots, I think they've all had new water mains installed, right? As part of the Estero Boulevard project.
I could not tell you.
If they have, they probably will meet it.
Mhm.
But if they haven't, they probably won't.
Estero
I thought.
has, but did every street I didn't think every street got a new main.
No.
I thought only Estero.
There were some side
Yeah.
streets that did, but I'm not
Mhm.
sure if those.
But not all.
And then the stormwater also went out into the
Mhm.
canal.
Fairweather did not.
I had questions with regards to the 40 inches.
Mhm.
Um, Can you elaborate a little bit on that? So what's our requirement right now with regards to the extension of any eaves into the setbacks? And is the 40 inches from the property line or separation from eave to eave?
It's from the property line. The way the building code
Okay.
is written, it's from the property line. If we get into much detail, I'll have to ask Steve to speak, but the way our code is currently written, our zoning code allows an overhang of up to 3 feet, which would get that overhang closer than 40 inches to the side property line, which in turn would be in violation of building code, and then there would be additional requirements.
Hmm.
So basically, it just doesn't go forward as just this one change. We would have to make several different changes and put additional requirements on the building department to make sure that they checked them. So that was my concern.
And is it just that you have to fireproof your eaves at that point versus? Yeah, and I think that's part of the building code already. So my understanding is when in other communities, new communities that get built with 5-foot setbacks, they just know either they keep the eaves back or if they bring them any closer than, 40 inches, they have to fireproof those eaves. So I think it would be pretty consistent with the rest of Lee County when it comes to building practices. I don't think we're really looking at a major exception here.
It may be consistent with Lee County, but it wouldn't be consistent with our current building reviewer criteria. It's not how we currently do reviews. From my reading of the code, it can't get closer than 40 inches, but there are requirements if it's that close to be fire
Basically
rated.
fireproof.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you any specifics, but if you want more detail, I can ask Steve to speak.
See, if I may comment, seems like if with the 5-foot setback, if the roof overhang was 1'8" or less, you're fine. But if you want to have the maximum 3-foot overhang that's allowed by the current code, roof overhang, then that eave has to be fireproof,
Yeah,
which is, that might be fine.
yeah. I think so.
Steve, do you have any comments on this? Where are you?
Hiding.
Behind the post.
He's really hiding.
Well, and while, you're saying, well, it could overhang up to 1.8, just to be aware, like when a house comes in, then the reviewers have to be cognizant of, okay, well, there's this additional requirement. It has a lesser setback. So it's like, it's just more things to keep up with.
So we're getting into a dangerous area here, putting buildings too close together.
Steve, will you just say your name for the record?
My
please?
name is Steve Poposky, Community Development Director and Building Official. So the problem is that fires spread between buildings. There's limitations as far as what kind of openings you can have on the surface of like, if you put buildings too close together, you have a lot of restrictions or potentially prohibited to have an opening in that wall. Like you can't have a window, which means you can't have a bedroom, which means you can't have a house. So everything plays upon each other. I don't want to necessarily get too far into the code, but if you have a question about a specific, there's a table, there's a whole chapter 7 in the Florida Building Code building volume, which goes into protection of projections, is what they call, as far as eaves and cornices. There's, as far as, like I said, the openings, and then the fire rating. You may even have to have a sprinkler system in your house if you're too close. So it's kind of a can of worms, I guess you would say. It opens up a lot of different potential confusion and problems, and frankly, just danger. So our recommendation would be to keep the setbacks the way they are, just out of a public safety aspect.
The way they are being, what, for this, we're talking about 5 feet, so you're saying more than 5 feet.
Right. Well, so you're allowing projections, right? Yeah. Typically, you're going to have an overhang. So that's where you get what's called a fire separation distance, and you have to be away from either and again, it's very complicated, but the interior lot line is typically where you measure to. Or if two buildings are close to each other, it's halfway between the two buildings, or the middle of the street, but whichever one is less. So again, once you get below 5 feet, you start to get a lot of different other things coming into play as far as building code and just safety. And typically the houses are not built that way.
But they are here.
What's that?
But they are here. I mean, that's what we're doing, is trying to keep those properties that have 5 foot to have 5 foot,
Right.
instead of changing them because they have an odd shaped lot. So we're not trying to make it something reduced. We're trying to allow them to keep what they have, basically.
Right. Anything that's there currently is not going to be required to be, destroyed. But if you're building something new, or if, you want to plan ahead, you want to follow the current codes.
So we're
An
just
existing
rebuilding.
building is treated a little differently than a new building.
Yeah, I think what Jane's saying is we're rebuilding what was there, right? So, I mean, a lot of these are gone. So we're trying to put them back just the way they were.
That
We're
would be
trying-
considered a new building.
Understood,
It
right?
would be
Yep.
considered a new building.
Yeah, if it's
Right.
totally gone, if it's, if it's there and you're just repairing something below 50% of the value, then it's considered an existing. Once it's above 50%, or if it was there, we had some before, but it's totally gone, we want to build it back the same way, you may not be able to, depending on the current, how the codes have changed.
So what's your recommendation?
I think you should keep the setbacks the way they are. Obviously, you could squeeze it, you could potentially go a little less, but again, there's a reason why the codes are written the way they are. And people they typically don't put a full sprinkler system in their house. They don't, build firewalls on the outside. They want windows. They need windows for a bedroom. Typically the bedroom's on the outside of the house. So it really limits a lot of the design aspects of the building. if you don't have an egress window and you don't have a door, which you typically don't in a building to the outside, it can't be a bedroom.
Steve, I know you've worked in other communities in Southwest Florida, and you know how Collier County, Lee County, almost everywhere allows 5-foot setbacks.
Mhm.
Almost every new plan development is 5-foot setbacks, 10-foot separation. And
With eaves.
with the,
overhang.
there's restrictions,
Right,
obviously.
sure.
And the thing is, we're trying to balance here, allowing people to build back what they had and giving flexibility. And again, being conscious of, safety issues. Do you think in those other communities, when it's new buildings that meet code requirements, that's been problematic? I would assume they design accordingly, and then the homeowner here would have the choice to spend that extra money to fireproof or design where he doesn't have a window possibly. But has that been problematic elsewhere?
I would say it would be. Typically, your setbacks are about 7.5 feet for a reason, so that you can have a nice generous overhang, get the solar protection from the sun, keep the sun out of the windows. Obviously for water, keep water away from the house. And then just in general, the reason why the building code, the intent of that is to keep it away from each other. There's been several times throughout history of our country and others that buildings are placed too close together with probably they just didn't think of it. And there was some major fires that spread between buildings, ended up, people died. So yeah, I mean, again, you could design it, but you're talking about sprinkler systems. You're talking about, rated assemblies. You're talking about no windows, and the no windows thing sounds like, well, we'll design around it, but you really can't. Not very well. You can't have a bedroom on the outside of your building, which is typically where else are you going to put your bedroom? Right in the center of your house is probably not going to happen. It's typically on the outside. You have the great room concept. There's not that much room on these lots, right? So you're going to have bedrooms on both sides of the house. Well, if you're too close, you can't have an opening. So there's a problem. You can't have a door, you can't have a window. It's too close. If you do have an opening, it has to be protected. A lot of cost. In real terms, what ends up happening is people start living in rooms that they shouldn't be living in. And you have people put their kids in what other people would call a closet. And it's a public safety issue. We can't necessarily know everything that's going on. But if people have a room that looks like a bedroom, but for all intents and purposes, but isn't safe, then you have people sleeping in a room that they shouldn't, a lot of times kids will be put in a smaller room that's not really a bedroom.
But what's the separation between wall to wall? So we're talking about, like, I've always heard about the eaves being too close and you fireproof the eaves.
Mhm.
But if I've never heard of having to go to that extent of what you're saying, if you've got 10 feet from wall to wall.
Yeah, this is a pretty complicated
Hmm.
discussion. I mean, I have a table here I could show you. It's literally, 3 pages long, but it's in the building code, and you're talking about the fire separation distance in number of feet between what it turns out to be the interior lot line or the side lot line and the building. And for example, less than 3 feet, you're not allowed to have any openings.
But that would be,
Yeah.
our wall would be at 5 feet.
Mhm.
So, but we're,
So it would only be the eaves that would be affected by this.
Correct.
fireproof.
it's the
We're
eaves.
we're at a planning meeting. We're not saying nothing can be done. We're just saying if you want to plan it out for the safety of the public, I'm just giving my recommendation. It's not that, yes, you can make it, you can have 2 buildings touch each other if you have enough walls and no openings, and it's all, 2 or 3 hour rated, and depending on the occupancies and so on and so forth. You have cities like London that were rebuilt the correct way, but there's no windows between those buildings.
If I might be able to provide, I guess, some context to what Mr. Popovsky is talking about is, one, we have a situation where we have these smaller lots, and in most cases, not all, many of those homes that we're looking to facilitate to being rebuilt are older homes that, pose an issue under the existing regulations that we now have. And in the case of the Florida Building Code, one that's imposed upon us by the state legislature. And so as that document has been modified and continues to be modified on a regular basis, new things come up or new issues come up. And what we're talking about here is, again, trying to put it into context, is that just as you have in a commercial building such as this, multiple exits in order to be able so that anyone on any given floor in this building would have access to an alternate exit in case of a fire. Well, the same applies to homes. We may not think about that, but it does. So how does the Florida Building Code and modern construction account for that? Windows and back doors and other exits. And so when you design a home today under the current standards, and it's a bedroom, if the bedroom is down a hallway that the only way out is where a fire might be present, then you have to have a window in order to give the people who are in that bedroom at some point in time an alternate access or exit from that home in the case of a fire. And the other front door is blocked. So, we have all these issues that we are having to follow that are imposed upon us by the state, and for good reason, safety, that now comes up and butts up against, construction and lots that, when they were built and when they were laid out, these rules didn't exist. And so while there's a desire to accommodate and facilitate redevelopment in a situation that we currently find ourselves in, we also have to be cognizant, and we have to take into consideration the requirements of the Florida Building Code as they exist today. We just as much as we may want to or like, that's the entire purpose of having a statewide Florida Building Code, that it's difficult to simply modify it because, the people who are in charge, the Florida Building Commission, these are the minimum standards that they've established for all of us across the state. And so to Mr. Popovsky's point, is that table dictates, and as Ms. Prof said, we need to, is there enough fire flow? Because the closer the homes are, the more water pressure there has to be in order to try and save these homes. God forbid there's a fire, because they're going to jump and propagate to the next door neighbor property. They're more likely if they're closer. Makes sense. So that's what we're dealing with, and we have to take all those issues into consideration in deciding, are we going to allow homes to be built closer to each other or not? The problem is that once you pierce the wall, the fire ratings and all that kind of stuff increase. But on the other hand, if you don't pierce the wall, then those people don't have means of egress in case of a fire.
Steve, may I ask you a question? When you say you think the setback should be left alone, are you referring to 7.5 feet or 5 feet?
So from a safety aspect, 7.5 is always obviously safer. 5 is the absolute minimum, but even then you're placing a burden upon, I think, the plan review process to some extent. You're adding a whole lot of extra potential problems in the permitting process and so forth. People think, 5 foot, I should be able to build a wood house with wood soffits and no problem, 4 foot overhang, whatever it is. And it's just not the case. And so you're both from a public safety aspect, which is really I'd like to try to stay mostly on, but also just from a misunderstanding. They think that because it says in this book that you can put it at 5 foot, that I can build whatever I want. And it just isn't the way. It just isn't the case.
And I don't think anyone, at least I'm not saying you can build anything you want. I'm saying it allows 5 feet with more than 18, an 18-inch overhang. You have, we could require sprinklers. We could require, the bottom line is you have a lot. You can either build on it or you can't. If you can't build on it, it's really useless, right? So here's your option. You can build on it with a 5-foot setback, but you're gonna have to maybe put sprinklers in, fire rated, there's gonna be several requirements for that. I agree that it's a burden on the permitting process because that's now gonna be a requirement, but if I have a lot that I could either build on or not, I'm gonna build on it. It's gonna cost me more because I'm gonna sprinkle it or I'm gonna fire rate the eaves or whatever. I'm gonna be required to build it a certain way. I think we're all saying like, we're okay, requiring to build it a certain way. We're just trying to let it be built, right?
Jane?
I'm just having a really hard time with 5 foot being a dangerous fire hazard because, I mean, I can count off millions of new communities that are planned communities, and they are all 5 feet from the property line. I mean, my daughter lives in one. So, I mean, Kelly Greens, Laguna Lakes, I
Well-
can just name off 100 of them.
Okay.
And so I can't imagine that, we're talking about 148 houses that would not be able to build a decent sized home or a reasonable home that have existed for the last however long these homes have been on this island. And I don't know that I can name a lot, many, or if there were any
Mhm.
fire jumping things. But I do think that it is something that we're trying to allow to have them built. We're certainly not saying go below 5 feet.
But I think it's also very important to remember that we're not talking about existing homes. We're talking about new homes, which is what Steve's point was. These are new houses. This is new construction. So,
Which is actually better than the
yes,
old.
because you'll be able to put these stipulations on the new
Right.
construction that you're
Right.
alluding to. Okay, Sarah, did you want to say something or should we
Um,
open the public comments?
So I did want to say, I did have some suggestions in the staff report of what could be done to
Okay.
mitigate this. One was to decrease the allowable encroachments, which would mean you essentially couldn't have overhangs over like basically half a foot. Or
Did you say a
which-
half a foot?
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be much.
6-inch.
Yeah, I mean, because you couldn't get closer than 40 inches.
Okay.
The walls could not be closer than 5 feet. You could not have an entrance on the side because those are going to be second-story entrances. So you
Right.
can't have a deck up to it. So there would be additional requirements. And then there would also be the additional requirement on the building plan reviewer. Another option would be a 6.5-foot side setback, which would allow the same overhang. It would allow some, decks if you have, I don't know that it would allow very minimal sized if you needed to have an exit off of the side of the house. So 6.5 would probably be the minimum distance if you want to keep all of the other allowances the same.
Still be like a 12-inch there, right? I mean, it'd be a pretty small
3 feet. No, I mean,
Oh,
you'd be,
really?
yeah,
Oh.
because at 6.5 feet, you can, if you can't get closer than 40 inches, 4 feet is 48 inches. So,
So if you add a foot to each side, you could put a 3-foot staircase? I didn't.
I'm
Doesn't-
terrible at
doesn't
math,
seem
which is
bad.
why I'm a planner.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
But
fine, yeah.
yeah, that's the way that I had
Okay.
figured it out previously. Also, I did want to point out to what Jane said. One thing that we don't have on the island that a lot of these communities have, they're built by one builder. So one builder has 5 houses that they put in over and over and over again. If they have those setbacks, they already know, I mean, they basically have pre-approved designs. They already have all of that in place. So the town reviews that plan, those 5 plans, and then they're done. As opposed to here, we're going to be reviewing each house individually by different builders. So it's just going to be the process of explaining it, multiple times. And it can be done certainly, but that's sort of the difference.
Okay, let's open the public comment. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Sarah. Good morning.
Hello, everybody. My name is Samir Malvia. I'm with Homebound. I'm joined by my colleague Tyler Knaufel.
Yeah. It's Knaufel, Knaffelc. There you go.
No way.
See? So we were.
Thank
first of all-
you.
First of all, thank you so much for having us. We're with Homebound. We were the original proposer of these setback changes. And as a reminder, this is because lots on Fairweather, Miramar, and other streets like that, given the skew of the lot, their effective buildable width is less than 50 feet. So if you impose the 7.5-foot setbacks on an effective buildable width, in the most extreme case is Fairweather, where I believe we're 45 and change is the effective buildable width when you measure it to the right angle. And that puts us down to a buildable footprint about 30 feet wide. We have taken a landscape study, and I think we talked about this last time, of the other builders on the island. And none of these semi-custom builders, so the ones that have, similar to what you mentioned, Anita, where they have a few floor plans and few elevations that are more cost-effective, more easier to build, easier to get through permitting, are in that 30-foot range, and so which is why we applied for some relief here. So we would be very, appreciative if, five, I think Sarah proposed 6.5, 5 feet, obviously 5 feet was the original proposal. If that's problematic, the 6.5 would get us there as well, right? So 6.5 would take you from the 45 and change to 32 and change. Standard house plans, whether it's us, whether it's some of our competitors on the island, all start at around 32 feet. So this would allow these homeowners to rebuild, not build a custom home where they incur tens of thousands of dollars of architectural fees, planning fees, et cetera, right? So they would work with a builder like us or any of our competitors and be able to build something that was semi-custom in nature. Again, all of our, just to speak to our product, all of our product is that's cementitious siding that is fire rated. And we have a lot of experience building in fire markets. In fact, Tyler, who works in Boulder, who led all of our permitting in Boulder for the fires, I wanted to say something about what we do there.
Yeah, so I'm a Colorado native, and when the Marshall Fire came through, that was a big push for us. The Sagamore neighborhood in Superior, Colorado, in unincorporated Boulder County, was built in the early 90s with 5-foot setbacks, but they were all wood siding. And unfortunately, that entire neighborhood was razed during that fire. What we did is develop product that would still work with that 5-foot setback with eave overhangs. Our plan 0 and 1 in Colorado follow all the eaves, soffit requirements, fireproofing on the walls and things like that. As Samir said, we build back with cementitious siding. It's a very touchy subject in Colorado, obviously. We want to build back a stronger community, which we have. I've gotten through 25 permits and we are at our 5th CO on 5-foot setbacks, no fire sprinklering, and no fireproofing on the exterior walls. That's certainly not what we're asking here, but we are just wanting to bring up a case study of Colorado last year and into this year of what we're doing with 5-foot setbacks there in a community that is very concerned about building back stronger and having more fire resistant material construction. So that's our big push. As Samir said, we are a semi-custom production home builder. We do have 5 ready plans. These were designed to fit within 6.5 foot mark, but the more that we have, the better for our plans. And like our number one priority is just getting these people back home and developing and building something that's desirable to them.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Hartzell, you have a comment on this?
Steve Hartzell, for the record. I had no intention of commenting on this, but
You couldn't resist.
honestly, I want to thank you all for looking at something like this on a bigger scale. It's really important as we're redeveloping to be looking at the bigger scale for how do you deal with, you mentioned 148 homes. What will happen? Let's assume nothing takes place. These gentlemen will be contacting lawyers like me and going, or their owners, saying, we need a variance. And so you will be facing variances. People who need to be able to rebuild will be stuck trying to prove a hardship, trying to prove that this is the minimum, going through all of those steps. What you all are looking at today is kind of how do we address that on a bigger scale? But I really appreciate what staff is talking about, which is to say, there's a bunch of different things that come into play if you're going to have reduced setbacks or these reduced standards. The other time that I get involved is when somebody goes to a great deal of expense, spends a lot of money, either something gets missed and they get started on the building, or they've spent all that money and then they go, gosh, we didn't know about X. We thought we could do, just like Mr. Poposky was saying, we thought we could do those things. I don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. I would encourage you, though, if you do make changes, just struck me that staff has pointed out that there's a half a dozen or a dozen standards that would come into play if you're going to do this, if you want to build at this 5-foot setback. I would encourage you to list those as a footnote to 5 feet, but look at these 12 things. And by the way, these may not be the only 12 you have to look at if you're designing, but at least what that will do is it'll help staff when they're doing their review, and it'll help a designer as they're designing. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Is there anybody else who'd like to make public comment? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. I think it's interesting that Samir said 6.5 gets them where they need to be. And the staff said 6.5 allows everything to stay in the normal box. Am I stating that correctly, Sarah? So why are we pushing 5? The greater the setback, the better the neighborhood. 6.5 allows the construction that Tyler and Samir are talking about, and evidently the other developers are talking about. So why wouldn't we go to 6.5?
I agree.
I'm not opposed.
Patrick?
No, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
If 6.5 gets us there.
Yep,
Our goal is to get these people back in their homes as
Yeah.
that's right.
quickly and
To give them what
as
they need.
and as cost effective as
Mhm.
possible. So
Right.
saying you got to put sprinklers in and all that, it's not going to work.
Hey,
And we don't want as many variances as possible.
Yep.
That's
We want
right.
to get these people back in their
Yep.
homes.
Steve, I can't see you behind that post, which maybe is intentional. You could just nod for me. So at 6.5, Sarah has nodded. Now, do you nod also that 6.5 allows this issue to move forward, but leaves the parameters clear for our building people and the builders?
Yes, it limits the number of
Not on record.
Okay, Steve said yes, because it limits the numbers of changes needed for the plans, correct? Okay. Okay. Well, that being so Sarah, we wouldn't, we need a microphone for Sarah, so you don't have to always come up, or come just slide up next to Scott. So Sarah, if we make a motion to make this change to 6.5 foot setbacks on these peculiar lots, does that clear and help you move all of this forward?
Yes, am I on? Hello? I'm not sure. Am I on now? Okay, great.
There you go.
Yes, that helps me. And what it is, it's not the parallelogram lots, it's lots less than 50 feet.
Correct.
So it was lots less than 50 feet would have and I'm trying to think of the correct language we used, but the width of the lot, actually measured width of the lot.
May I comment?
Effective width, yeah. So the effective width of the lot, less than 50 feet would get them a 6.5 foot side setback. It won't be able to move forward with the parallelogram lot ordinance language because that's going to the next town council, which is on next Monday. But it could go the following meeting.
Okay. Doug?
Yeah, I think you hit on it. You need to, not 50-foot lots, you need to qualify the effective width and define it as perpendicular to the side lot, because the parallelograms lots have different angles.
Well, and I actually amended the way that lot width is measured because it was measured in 2 different ways depending on when the lot was created, which didn't make any sense because you could have the same lot that was designed at a different time that would be
Sure.
measured differently. So we've actually changed the language in there to make it more clear and make it more correct for how wide the lot actually is.
So I think, yeah, so that it would work with any parallelogram lot, and the solution that, for the front and back setbacks looks fine. And the side setbacks, minimum 6.5 feet, seems to give you a 32-foot wide building, which is what you wanted, and not trigger
Any of
fire
the
rated
others?
walls and so
Mhm.
forth, because you'll have 42 inches, even if you have a 3-foot roof overhang, you'll have 42 inches, which is greater than the 40-inch minimum. So I think that's a solution.
Doug, would you like to make a motion to that effect?
If I may make a motion to what I just said. I don't know if I can- But
Would the motion be to approve or to change?
I think it would be, the motion would be to approve the presentation that was in our package, except change option A to a minimum 6'6" instead of 6 foot, which is noted here. I believe that's what we're talking about.
So a 6'6" side setback on lots with an effective width of less than 50 feet.
Correct.
So moved.
So there is a motion.
I'll second
and, the motion was by Doug and the seconded by Jim.
Oh, okay.
You got to get faster, Jane.
Sorry. I didn't hear it.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Samir and Tyler, thank you for your participation. Mr. Hartzell, thank you for your comments. Okay, so with your indulgence, let's go on to number C, which is the Commercial Plan Development Amendment for TPI, and then we'll do Old Seaport, since those folks are here, and then we'll do the other two, okay? So ordinance number 1804, Commercial Plan Development Amendment to Conditions of Approval for TPI Margaritaville. This is to approve or deny with changes 1170, 1180, 1192, 1204, 1206 Estero Boulevard, DCI 202-380039, and it's a request to amend the ordinance to modify conditions of approval. This is an ex parte hearing. And may I have any disclosures from you, Mr. Safford?
I had a brief conversation with Mr. Torgerson.
Okay, and Jim?
No discussion.
Doug?
No ex parte.
Jane?
No ex parte.
Pat?
I had a discussion with the applicant.
No ex parte.
I had and I, for the record, had a discussion with the applicant. Okay, so we will open it up to staff. Yes, John? Swearing in everyone. Yes, I apologize. Anyone who is going to give testimony in this case, would you please stand to be sworn in? Go ahead, John.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Witness has been sworn.
Thank you, John.
Good morning, Sarah Probst with Community Development. The applicant for TPI FMB, Stephen Hartzell, is requesting an amendment to the two conditions of approval in Ordinance 18-04, the commercial plan development that approved TPI FMB, known as Margaritaville. The applicant is requesting amendments to conditions 14 and 20. Condition 14 requires that the landowner execute and record a restrictive covenant that states all allowable density and intensity on parcels 1, 2, 3, and 5 has been used, and that no additional development may occur. Also, that the landowner must convey a restrictive covenant to the town for a perpetual conservation agreement, or easement rather, over the portions of parcels 2 and 3 that are not constructed on, in order to limit additional development on those parcels. The applicant proposes removal of the restrictive covenant requirement and the conservation easement requirement, and proposes that future development beyond the approved CPD would have to be approved by the town council and comply with the comprehensive plan and land development code. Condition 20 requires that parcel 3, which consists of a surface parking lot, be included in the covenant and conservation easement described in condition 14 to ensure the maintenance of the view corridor. The applicant proposes striking through the requirement for the covenants and conservation easement on parcel 3. The applicant is here and staff is also available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there questions for Sarah? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Hartzell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Steve Hartzell. I am here on behalf of TPI FMB. The applicant with me today, as you noticed, is Tom Torgerson and John Dammerman. They are the two principals. In the TPI organization. If you can move it forward just from there, that'll be fine too. I don't have to have control, despite what my wife says.
Yeah, I don't give up control.
Great, next slide. We're here to, the request is to amend ordinance 1804, which approved Margaritaville MPD, which is at the foot of the Matanzas Pass Bridge. The next slide shows that. Excellent, thank you very much. Appreciate it. So why are we asking for the amendment? The details are in the request narrative. The past 6 months have turned the town upside down. Everybody's working hard to respond to the impact of Hurricane Ian. I don't think anyone ever really expected to have to deal with what you have been for these past 6 months. It's these unexpected changes that cost Mr. Torgerson, Mr. Dommerman to ask what might affect Margaritaville in the future. According to Land Development Code 34-1, the purpose and intent of the Land Development Code is to encourage and promote, in accordance with present and future needs, safety, health, order, convenience, prosperity, and general welfare of the citizens, and to provide for the efficiency and economy in the process of development and for the appropriate and best use of land. When we look at section 34-85B, in considering rezonings, where there's an error or ambiguity that must be corrected, and whether there exist changed or changing conditions which make approval of a request for rezoning appropriate. TPI submits that there are changed circumstances that are arising from the devastation of Hurricane Ian to the local community and its impacts on the economy that require these changed circumstances and make it inappropriate to look to the future, or I'm sorry, to make it look appropriate to look to the future of Margaritaville CPD, which we hope serves as an anchor and an inspiration for future redevelopment of Fort Myers Beach. Now, condition 14 has an inherent ambiguity, we would submit, in that it talks about the intent, which is to limit in perpetuity the density and intensity of parcels 2 and 3 to that which is approved by the CPD, and maintain all areas on which buildings and pavement are not constructed only for outdoor recreation on parcel 2 and a single level surface parking lot on parcel 3. Maintaining an open area on which buildings and pavement are not constructed only for single level surface parking is inconsistent internally, and that ought to be clarified, we believe. More importantly, condition 14 appears intended to bind future town councils from even considering any redevelopment that might increase density or intensity, regardless of whether those future changes would be compatible with future development and regulations. We submit that changed circumstances make it appropriate to amend condition 14, which unnecessarily limits the town's ability to respond to changes. Looking at that condition, it presently says, prior to the town issuing any development orders for demolition, site work, or new buildings on parcel 2, the landowner must execute and record a restrictive covenant in favor of the town and enforceable in perpetuity that acknowledges that the CPD approval has consumed all allowable density and intensity on parcels 1, 2, 3, and 5. That's the restrictive covenant part of this, which removes all flexibility or opportunity for the town to respond differently in the future. Even if that change becomes appropriate, it ties the hands of future town councils. Is it necessary? No, it's not, because no additional development can occur beyond that which is approved by the CPD without the prior approval of the town council, even without this condition. Condition 14 also requires a conservation easement to do the same thing. And it goes on to say, and I'll just hit the highlighted portion, the landowner must convey to the town a perpetual conservation easement in a form acceptable to the town attorney, which will be recorded in the public records over the portions of parcels 2 and 3 on which structures or pavement are not constructed. TPI submits that this, under the very new post-Hurricane Ian environment, it no longer makes any sense to completely eliminate all flexibility or future opportunities for modifications in perpetuity. That's counterproductive to the town's desire to be certain that all development has to be compatible and cohesively mesh with future framework of the town's redevelopment. There must be opportunities available for future town councils to accommodate unexpected changing circumstances like Hurricane Ian. So what can you do? The town can amend the ordinance to remove the unneeded restrictions that allow future councils then to consider the circumstances at that time and decide, while still providing all of the needed protection and authority. And that's why we've presented here the revised version of condition 14 would continue to say no additional development may occur beyond that which is approved by this CPD without prior approval of the town council. The intent of this condition is to require that any future changes to this CPD must comply with the Fort Myers Beach Plan and Land Development Code in effect at the time of any future application. We would submit that the proposed change to condition 14 promotes the intent of Chapter 34 and gives the town greater flexibility to consider future redevelopment to be consistent with future changes that may occur to the community. If you agree with that, the reason that we have also included condition 20 is that there's a reference in condition 20 to the conservation easement in section 20A. And you'll see on that last slide, it says parcel 3 will be included in the covenants and conservation easement described in condition 14. And we would suggest that that also be eliminated. Based on that, we would request that you recommend to the city or to the town council that these changes be approved. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there questions for Mr. Hartzell? Steve, I have a question. So 20 on condition number 20. So you're leaving in place that no buildings will be constructed on parcel 3 in perpetuity? Parcel 3 shall remain as a 21 space surface parking lot for the resort because all development rights on parcel 3 are being used on parcels 1 and 2? That stays.
That's the
Okay. Okay. Other questions? for Mr. Hartzell? None? Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very
Uh,
much.
Mr. Torgerson, Mr. Damerman, do you have? Comments to make, or are you just here to just,
or your lifetimes or my grandkids' lifetimes and so on and so forth. But in perpetuity is just, we all know it, it's forever. And again, backing up and restating it, it's really Ian that just changed our view of what this really means and the imposition it has on the future of this community, or could have. And I'll just add just one more bit of color. We're already dealing with a circumstance today that plays into this to a degree. Prior to Ian, we had preserved and under the 50% rule, rebuilt the what's known the bubble room or the cigar hut. It's had some different lives through time, but that was fully rebuilt under the 50% rule, number of different permits and processes that you need to go through, and we lost it. And that was to serve as our bathhouse for, the largest beach club that will be on Fort Myers Beach. And I like to say, I don't know if I like to say it, but to take bathrooms and put them, 15 feet in the air for a beach club that has a capacity of 1,000 people isn't really in anyone's best interest. And we're dealing with Steve and Kristen currently very aggressively in with the state floodplain manager to get those rebuilt and approved at grade level. But 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, maybe we wouldn't be able to do that. How these codes are going to change. That's one thing that we can count on, is that they're going to get more and more restrictive, and conditions change. So it's really all about removing or allowing or reinstating the flexibility that the town has to consider conditions in the future. That really applies to, I think, any CPD that's been approved on the island. I don't think, and I might be put my foot in my mouth, but I don't think some restriction like this has probably ever been imposed in Fort Myers Beach's history. So I'll close with that. And I don't know if John, if you want to say anything, or he probably wants to say good morning.
thank you, Tom. Good morning, John.
Good morning, John Damerman. I guess the only thing I would add is that just so we're clear, we have no intentions or plans for those parcels. We're spending millions of dollars on a beach club and fully intend to use those parcels for that purpose. But as Tom said, in perpetuity, I don't know, could we be faced, or some future owner, hopefully not in my lifetime, but some future owner be forced to elevate the pool, to some 15 feet, above flood. So anyway, just wanted to make that point that, that there's no ulterior motive. There's nothing, I guarantee you, there are no plans to do anything else with that property. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the applicant? Hearing none, I'll open the public comment. Anybody here to make public comment on this case? Closing public comment. Anyone on the committee have questions for staff or the applicant? If there's none, may I have a motion, please? Or would you like to just chat about it for a minute?
I do feel like it is reasonable to have these questions brought forward based on the fact that I don't believe that there are any other CPDs that have restrictions that were put on like this that we can never look at any changes that might be beneficial for the town or for the applicant in the future. And I think we're still holding them to meet the standards of Fort Myers Beach Plan and LDC. So I don't think it's inappropriate to open that door.
Okay. Any other comments?
I agree, and I'd just like to make a comment in case people are watching this. I think, to me, respecting property rights and respecting due process is important. I think that opens a door where we're infringing upon those rights to a certain extent. We have a process that if an applicant wants to ask to change something with regards to their land, they can go through that proper process. We can have public hearings and we make decisions to prohibit that process in the future, to me, is an infringement. So I'm sure you know where I stand, and I support removing this condition that restricts them in perpetuity.
So I was on the council when this CPD was approved, and to say that it was complicated would be an underestimate of it. It was, and you're right, Jane, I don't think there is another CPD that has any of these restrictions. It was a unique case in many, many ways. I have to tell you, though, that I struggled with this for a little bit until I started thinking about what could have happened on that property. So if the buildings on the beachside had been lost or compromised or just lost, they would not be able to be reconstructed because of this provision. And so, and that wasn't the intent of this. The intent of this was to button up this CPD as tightly as we possibly could. That was the intent. But the world has changed, at least for Fort Myers Beach, and we have to recognize that that things will be impacted. And though I was happy to see when I came over the bridge for the first time, I was very happy to see that Margaritaville was still standing. And I'm happy to see it moving forward, and I'm happy to support this request. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'd like to move to approve the revision as it is printed on page 8 of condition 14.
Make sure that you refer to that as page 8 of the
Of
applicant's
The applicant's
presentation.
presentation. And page 9 or 10. Whoops. I'm sorry. It is paragraph 8 of page 4. The clean revision of the revised condition 14. And on page 5, paragraph 9, for consistency, the condition number 20 mentioned in the reference to that conservation easement in number 14 as to be amended as well.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Just for clarification, John, I just want to, Mr. Herron, make sure that there is nothing else more formal that needs to be included in that motion.
The motion should be that you are forwarding the item to the city, the town council with a
Mhm.
recommendation of approval as submitted by the applicant, the specific changes to the ordinance. And that's all you need to do.
Perfect. And that's what we have. Thank you very much.
It is always good and not a bad thing to state that it's, you're making the recommendation because you believe that the changes are consistent with the town's comprehensive plan and land development code and consistent and furthers the intent of the original CPD.
I'll amend that to state that it is consistent, and we are forwarding it to the town council for review.
Okay.
Second that amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Don. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Jane, your vote?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Jim?
Yes.
Doug?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And Anita, yes. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Hope you get the restroom figured out, Tom. Next item on the agenda is the Old Seaport Place Amendment to the Master Concept Plan, Resolution 1739, to add seating and extend the consumption on premises, to approve with conditions or deny 645 Old San Carlos DCI 202-30008. Requested amendment to Commercial Plan Development, Old Seaport Place, to add seating and extend the consumption on premises and boundaries. I'll ask, first of all, for any ex parte communication. Don?
No.
Patrick?
Nope.
Jane? Doug?
No ex parte.
Jim?
No.
Scott?
None.
I have had none either. Everyone who's going to give testimony in this case, would you please stand to be sworn in? Mr. Heron? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Sarah.
Good morning, Sarah Probst with Community Development. The applicant for 645 Old San Carlos, known as Old Seaport, is requesting, well, Jim Figurato with Old Seaport, is requesting an amendment to the existing commercial plan development to allow for an expansion of the restaurant seating and alcohol service area, as well as an amendment to the master concept plan. The CPD was approved through Resolution 17-39. The proposed changes include an expansion of the area for consumption on premises for a 14 by 65 foot seating area of the Butler Act parcel, the dock area, which will include a non-structural shade element, a 7.5 by 29 foot walkway between the waiting area and the dining area, an approximate 210 square foot rail seating area that will remain uncovered, and a proposed 25 by 25 foot chicky hut. The total area of the expansion of COP is 3,451 square feet. The master concept amendment also includes the addition of a proposed covered walkway from the parking lot to the existing covered dock seating area, and the construction of a covered 8 by 10 foot hostess station with sign. The existing CPD includes conditions which will remain in effect and will extend the proposed new area of consumption on premises if this request is approved. There are no proposed changes to the allowed list of uses. The applicant is here and staff is also available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? Jane?
I only have the question where you stated that it was going to be uncovered and then there's going to be a cheeky hut. Is that not covered?
It's a separate seating area. There's a
Okay.
rail seating area along the dock edge, and then there's the chicky hut.
Okay,
further in.
okay. Just making sure they weren't the same. Okay.
Any other questions for Sarah? Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Jim? Nick?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Figueredo, and Deb and I own Old Seaport, and Nick and Pete and John run it and do a great job. These are changes that we were looking at. The covered walkway is really critical because we all, everybody lives here. We know that rainy season's coming, and our clientele is in that 40 to 80 year young. And when it rains, there's always a scramble and, how do we get everybody out of there without getting soaking wet, or how, people don't want to come in. So we wanted to cover the access to, where we serve food and drinks. We also wanted to, our business, people coming was not only because the food's good, but with the beautiful back bay, so we wanted to decrease that area, so people can enjoy it. We all know that the Bay Park will come back, better in time. And there's always events there. And, we want to be able to have some seating over there so people can that don't want to be in the middle part can kind of see it from back a little bit, but if they want to have a drink or whatever, they can. And I'm here to answer any questions at all.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions for Mr. Figueredo? Hey, Jim, you know, I'm having a flashback of one of the very first CPDs that the town had was you back at the time with Mid-Island Marina. And here you are again now, however, and here I am again now, many, many years later. And I just want to thank you for staying such an active participant in this town. It's nice to still have you here.
Well,
Really
thank
is.
you. It's,
Yeah.
it's home and it's wonderful.
It really is. And congratulations on the success of this project.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions for you. No one else?
Just a question there, you know, I know this is all walkability area and in increasing the seating, are there any other parking restrictions or anything else that needed to be met to approve this?
Well, the good thing is we had ample parking, so we don't need a variance for the parking. And we still have some additional parking. You know, not a lot. I think we have 7 or 8 extra parking places. But, you know, and the other thing is we're not asking for any changes on the existing, you know, restrictions or whatever on, you know, times and all of that stuff.
Okay.
Okay. Nothing else? All right. Thank you, Jim, very much. Nick, were you going to say something or no? Okay. It's nice to see you too. We will open the public comment. Is anybody here to make public comment on the Old Seaport application? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Any further discussion, questions for staff or the applicant from the committee? Seeing none, any discussion in general? Or would someone like to make a motion? I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the request with the conditions as outlined in the staff report for DCI 202-3008 to modify the master concept plan and by expanding the consumption on premise service areas and to further state that this is, I believe this is in compliance with the original plan development and relay on to the town council for approval.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion and multiple seconds. And hearing, is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Aye. Jim, aye.
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Well, thanks for doing a good job down there. We're glad you're open. All right, now we'll go back up to item A, which is a discussion. You know, I'm having such an age thing here today. Golly jeepers.
We haven't aged at all.
No, I know, but it's
How
like,
did that happen?
Jim was, he really was. He was one of the first CPDs and now, and this Seaport, well, anyway. Okay, discussion regarding setbacks for houses in primarily non-residential districts. We're going to provide input regarding setbacks on residential uses in non-residential districts.
Anybody
Sarah,
have a page number of where we're supposed to be?
well, you're going to go all the way back up. It's the
No.
first item under public
Right.
hearings.
True.
Sarah, if you want, you could just scoot in by Scott. We're not going to make you come back and forth. And in the future, is it possible to have another microphone up here so Sarah could just, do we have another microphone? We don't, we're out. Okay.
Can we order some?
She can have mine. I'll just speak loud.
Go ahead. Thank you, Sarah.
Good morning, Sarah Probst. And this is page 29 of the packet.
There you
Thank
go, Jane,
you.
29.
Thank you.
At the
Struggling.
April 11th LPA hearing, the LPA heard staff's concerns regarding 0 to 10-foot building line requirements for structures in the downtown zoning district. The LPA recommended that staff allow front setback flexibility for single-family and two-family residences in these primarily commercial zoning districts when the residential setbacks are located in areas where the urban fabric of the downtown will not be impacted by increased setbacks. To address this, staff is proposing two very specific changes to the downtown zoning district. The proposed language is in Exhibit A and includes build-to lines from 0 to 25 feet for single-family and two-family structures on secondary streets on the beach side of Estero Boulevard. Language has also been included to require a 7.5-foot side setback for single-family and two-family residential structures on the secondary streets on the beach side of Estero Boulevard. Staff is available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Sarah. Questions for Sarah? Patrick?
Sarah, yeah, we, site setbacks, the 7.5 feet, is that also pursuant to fire and safety issues? Have we talked about maybe going to 5 feet on that?
We didn't talk about that. I
Hmm.
know that on the beachside properties, there's been a strong desire over the years, and that may have changed, but there's been a strong desire over the years to have setbacks so that there was some visibility of the beach.
Mhm.
Yeah, just because I'm reading on page 31 where it's struck through. B, where it says minimum side setbacks are 5 feet from side property line except, and then you've got 1 and 2.
Yes.
So the way I kind of see it is we are diminishing someone's existing setbacks. So I'm concerned with that. I just wanted to know if, again, was it associated with fire and safety issues or something else?
Like on I Street, those are 50-foot lots at most, right?
Small lots.
I mean, especially from the beach bar down, it's kind of tight. I mean, 7.5, but what are you gonna be able to build on that?
But wouldn't those qualify under the previous hearing we had? What lots less than 50?
So we can apply the RS standard setbacks if that would be the preference, which would be over 80 feet, 10 feet, 7.5 feet from 80 to 50, then less than 50, 6.5. Would
Mhm.
that be preferred? And the reason I applied
Well,
that
it
is
keeps
because
it
this was part of
uniform.
the discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, don't you think it keeps it straight across the board?
Well, it's easier to educate the public if we have something that is somewhat, it's much easier to educate the public if we have something that is uniform. So I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, I'm still a little concerned in that, in the other instance, we're going with, something that we currently had at 7.5, and we were reducing it in the attempt of helping people. But now we're taking something that people have as a right at 5 feet, and we're looking at increasing it to 6.5. And I think those are two different circumstances. One, you're trying to create flexibility to help people, and now we're taking something away that they already had. So I wouldn't support that. I would want to keep it at 5 feet. Again, if we need to put caveats from a fire code standpoint and put an asterisk and say, pursuant to all building code, fire rating requirements, I'm okay with that.
I'm just trying to think, the only properties we're talking about are those Avenue IE, those are the only ones, correct? Because that's the only place where there was single family and two family residential construction on secondary streets on the beach side of Estero Boulevard in that downtown area. Is that correct?
I think Miramar too, right? If you include Miramar. On beach side of Miramar,
Possibly.
there's
Possibly.
7 or 8 homes.
Yeah.
Then you've got.
But is that still in that zone? Is Miramar?
If you look at page 30, there's the map that is in the
Yeah.
downtown zoning district, so you can see which streets are included.
Yep, so Miramar too. Palm and Virginia. Well, Virginia, there's nothing.
Well, then on the other side of I Street, you've got all those beach bungalows that are just
Yeah,
gone.
exactly.
So, and there's probably 20, 30 homes we're talking about. And I'm okay, like Patrick said, that those lots are so tiny. I mean, if we can do a caveat with fireproof and everything else, I don't think sprinklers, but I'm okay with 5 feet down there. I mean, it is the downtown district. So it's going to be a little bit more, it's
Intense.
different.
I agree with Patrick in the fact that they were allowed 5 feet setbacks. The new construction rebuilt on, I believe that's Avenue E, on the beach side to 5 feet from the right of way there. And it hasn't caused any problems. And I agree that that's what they would need to rebuild. Because the lots are very small.
Okay, any other comments or?
Well, 5 feet is consistent with what I think has been our philosophy, allowing people to rebuild what they had.
Okay. There's no public, so seeing no public comment, there is no public comment. Well, if there's no more discussion on this, would somebody like to make a motion? This is under public hearing, but you're only asking us to give you input, Sarah, so how do you feel about this?
If you could make a motion and
Okay.
that way I can move it on to council.
Okay,
I'd like to make a recommendation for forwarding the recommended changes by staff, except for the minimum side setback remaining at 5 feet as is in the current code.
Can we amend that to add the
Yes,
caveat?
and to add some kind of a caveat that if you're going to be at 5 feet, you need to make sure that you look at the building code and any kind of fire rating requirements.
Safety.
okay, there's a motion. Doug, do you wish to second that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Was that clear enough for you, Sarah? Okay. The next item, Sarah, you can just stay where you are because the next item is the dock and boat ramp amendments. So it's section 26-71 dock and boat ramp amendments to address multifamily docks. Let me go to that.
My apologies, too many papers.
No, that's okay. I think we're all looking for it here.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Sarah Probst with Community Development. At the April LPA hearing, staff brought up a need for language in ordinance section 26-71 dock and boat ramps for multifamily boat docks. The current language in the code for the number of allowed docks on a property only applies to single-family docks. Language has been added to allow up to 1 slip per legal residence in a multifamily development. Additionally, the reference to single family was removed from the dock section. This makes the dock length already contained in the code applicable to any dock, not just single family docks. The setback would apply to a dock in a multifamily property would be the setback that would apply to a dock on a multifamily property would be either the multi-slip dock on a natural water body setback of 25 feet, which is already contained in the code, or the private dock setback on artificial water body setback of 5 feet. This very narrow change resolves the single issue of how to review multifamily dock applications. However, during the review of this code section, staff discussed many issues with this code section that cause problems for staff and for property owners. These include lack of clarity on what is a natural versus man-made water body and why allowed docks within these two water body types differ a great deal. Boathouses and flexible covering setbacks being different than dock setbacks, agreement letters between property owners to allow encroachment, whether docks that do not meet the current code can be built back in the previous footprint, whether multifamily docks require a limited review development order, and how to develop docks on canal ends, which can rarely meet the code requirements. Staff asks the LPA to provide guidance on the proposed multifamily dock language and asks that the LPA consider whether the other items mentioned in the staff report should be addressed by staff in an ordinance amendment now or in the future. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Sarah. Questions for Sarah? Don, Patrick?
Yes. With regards to multifamily, do we have a lot of instances where some of these condo buildings might have more slips than they have units?
Not that I'm aware of. Most of these actually would be within the Bay Beach area, and there are fewer slips than units, it appears, in most of those. There in some of the buildings, there may be the same number, but I don't think there are any instances where there are more than the number of allowed units.
If we got rid of this one slip per unit, does that cause an impediment for staff? Is there, I'm just thinking if someone's got an opportunity to maybe throw in a few extra slips, they can get it permitted through the state agencies. And, you know, I don't know, it could be used for multi-purposes, you know. I've seen projects also where you know, Coast Guard got to use the extra slip on some projects. You know, I'm just not sure if there's a need to limit the number of slips to the number of units.
In that instance, are you turning a residential property into a commercial property by allowing the use of that dock? I know that that's a question in other communities.
Yes, I think so. I think you only need to look a little bit to see docks that are for sale.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it, like in the Bay Beach example, though, you have to be a condo owner to purchase one, I think, in Bay Beach.
Yeah.
Am I right? Jane?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You do?
That is
Yeah.
my understanding of the
Yeah.
situation.
But you could live at the Palms and buy a dock at
Yeah.
Casa Marina.
Right.
Certain ones do have restrictions that nobody other than the people that live in their building can rent those spaces, but most of them are open to everybody in Bay Beach.
Yeah, I was just trying to, I think that helps me understand this. It clarifies that I agree. I don't think we want to have extra slips that are just sold and become kind of a commercial entity. I think it's got to remain for residents. So I agree with that.
On section 4 setbacks under D, is that where you would address like cul-de-sacs on the side setbacks and things like that? Because there are a few canals that have issues with cul-de-sac parking for boats and docks and how they can be arranged on that
Right.
cul-de-sac to have a decent boat access.
So that was part of the questions regarding what additional items would you like us to look at? Because currently the majority of those, what you're calling cul-de-sac, those canal ends, they don't meet the setbacks and they end up getting an agreement letter. Those agreement letters are between the neighbors, which can cause problems down the road because it could impact access for the adjacent property owners. Maybe current property owners have a deal and they're fine. Properties get sold and you now have a fight, but that dock was allowed to be there.
Right.
So there are some issues with the designs of some of those dock ends because they're all designed in very different ways.
Right.
So I think that there could be opportunity to address that to some extent.
I think it would
It
be
is not
good.
currently addressed.
I think that is, you know, now that we have a lot of empty properties that are going to be looking at rebuilding and needing to have some idea of what their dock space could be to even consider the property, it would be helpful for them to have some reasonable expectation of what could be done. I think that would be good.
One of the problems that I do see is the irregularity of the subdivision design, unfortunately. In other communities that I've worked in that have very standard designs, their subdivisions have been designed in a specific way at those canal ends. So they, in advance, prepared for everyone to have that access. So it's somewhat the property line configuration that impacts the ability to do that. But I think that this could be an opportunity for us to look at how to do that better. Maybe having some meetings with property owners and maybe dock builders to talk about how this could be done better if the LPA is interested in that.
Right. Like in Fairview Isles, there's several
Yeah.
that have fingers and turnarounds and, you know, on every canal that goes in if there is a, you know, housing on those, or if it abuts a street, it doesn't really have a problem. Like, you know, through Shell Mound, it abuts a street, so it's not really an issue. But those that have a turnaround at the end and go back out, there's one on every canal. So it would be nice to have some language for at least to open up conversation between the neighbors to allow that written document to come about. I mean, that's one thing I've seen over and over in the past in real estate.
I do think it might be good to have a couple dock builders or something, just provide some information because,
Right.
you know, to
Good idea.
determine, you know, what have you experienced here? And, you know, is 5 feet the right, is 10 feet, you know, what is the, you know, what should the setback be?
Right.
And maybe some boat owners so that we can be familiar with how difficult those areas are to traverse in a boat.
You know, you've got a whole committee of boat owners on
Right.
the Anchorage Advisory Committee.
Yeah.
So maybe they should take a look at this.
Right. That would be a great suggestion.
Why don't we have them take a look at this and then bring it back to us?
Yeah, that'd be good.
And
I think more input is better.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know, I know we're looking at multifamily, but someone a property owner was telling me that he was getting some comments on a dock that extends onto the property and how he was asked to terminate the dock at the seawall. And I think I don't fully understand. I'd like to understand why we want that or don't want that. So I think that'd be a good discussion to have also and include that as part of the discussion.
Okay, yeah, and I do understand that discussion. I had that discussion with staff also, and these changes have been made in other codes and other communities to address this situation where a lot of people want to sort of extend their dock upland and have it sort of terraced. And you have to find a way to accommodate that, but to also ensure that there aren't any other impacts such as stormwater going directly from the house to the water. So I think that would be a good thing for us to look at. And I think that it would be wise to include the Anchorage Advisory Committee, especially on some of the canal end areas.
That'd be great.
I think we should continue this hearing and remand it to the Anchorage Advisory Committee for their comments and then bring it back to us.
Okay.
John, do we have to have a motion for that because it is a public hearing? We've got it advertised as a public hearing. Not sure why, but because we're amending the code. Yep.
You can table the item and up to it being referred to the
Got it. Okay.
Anchorage Advisory Committee, and I think that would be sufficient.
Do we
Okay.
need a date certain to bring it back so that it doesn't have to be re-advertised?
No, there's no formal document.
Okay.
But it's just asking for your input. It may probably mischaracterized on the agenda and it
Yeah.
should have been listed just as a discussion item.
Okay.
And are we holding the whole one, or are we approving that multifamily, where we limited that?
No, I think we should send it all to them.
Okay.
So may I have a motion, please, to take, I'll make the motion. We'll table item B on our agenda relative to dock and boat ramp amendments and remand it to the Anchorage Advisory Committee for their input.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay. We're up to the administrative agenda. Sarah, anything?
I did want to let you know that council will be taking the month of July off. I don't know if the LPA is interested in also taking a month off.
Okay. And how's anybody feel about taking the month of July off?
My only concern would be if there are any requests that we need to look at. I hate to.
Sarah,
Make-
how do
make
you,
people wait 2
what's the
months.
schedule look like? Is there anything that would push back?
June is going to be very busy. We will likely also have variances in July. I know we do have some variances that are sort of hanging out that we have not gotten completed yet. So you will have items if you have a meeting in July.
So,
But are you referring to cases in particular?
yeah,
As opposed to
variances, right, as
okay.
opposed to administrative, yeah.
Okay,
More if we have cases and we're going to hold up people for 2 months.
so
Yeah, I
he's
would
he's
say-
talking about people in general.
And I would extend that a little further also. It's
Mm.
not just individual variances. I think we have some items that we've asked staff to go back and look at and bring to us with regards to FAR, with regards to
Right.
how we calculate stories. And I think a lot of people in the development community are looking towards
Agreed.
where
Resolution on
the
that.
LPA and getting a little certainty on those items to make some decisions. So I think
I would agree. I think we kind of have to keep working because
Yeah.
there's so much to
Okay.
do.
So we leave our schedule open, Sarah. Just so you know, I will not be here in July, but I can participate through Zoom or whatever.
Same for me. I mostly.
Same for
but
me.
I'm happy to dial in or zoom in or whatever we
Yep.
need to do.
Okay,
three
LPA
of us
items, it's three, yeah. LPA items, and boy, that's three. If there's, so July could be tenuous, or we look at a date. Are
Maybe
you
it-
gone the whole month of July? You
Pretty
are.
much. What about having a second meeting in June towards the end, or when do you leave?
I'm leaving on the 4th of July.
Yeah, I will be gone also from probably the beginning of July. So maybe we could have a backup date.
Get your, yeah.
Maybe we could have a backup date at a second meeting in June.
Okay, is Zoom an issue? I thought before I joined by.
Well,
Zoom.
there's three of us already being,
Zoomed.
That's where it gets
Zooming.
dicey.
Well, yeah, when it comes to the meetings, state requirements and quorums, is Zoom an issue? Are we still under the COVID rules where Zoom works as well, or?
No, we're not.
Okay.
So that means that you would have to have at least a physical quorum. So a sufficient number of the LPA members must be physically present to constitute a quorum. And then as you're discussing, if there are going to be one or more of the LPA members who are going to be absent, the rules do allow for those situations, vacation, et cetera, for those members to attend remotely, if that is the decision of the LPA as a whole.
can Anita still run the meeting from a Zoom?
Oh, that would be so difficult to do.
I know.
It's,
And I'm going to be gone too.
I mean, I think I could do it because we did it during COVID, but it'd be difficult for the people who are in the room.
Right.
So I'm looking at the group here, and I think we've got three
Mhm.
people out.
Yeah, but I
So
mean,
we'd have four that could be here
So-
physically.
Would it be possible to do a meeting on, our June meeting normally would be on the 13th.
Mhm.
We could do another one on the 27th. 2 weeks later, would that help?
can staff.
And then if necessary to have a July meeting, I mean, if there is something else that's pressing, you put it on, you have it anyway. But at least if you know that you're going to schedule one on the on the 13th and the 27th, you get as much possible in.
Or push it out in July, right? Could we push it out to later in the month of July or no? Like the 20th or something? I don't know when people are back, but
Does that-
I'll fly back if you need a quorum. I'll come back. I mean, if we need
Well,
to.
that's great. Good. So Sarah, why don't we tentatively say that there will be a second meeting in June? But if you, oh, that's next month.
Yes.
Gosh, darn.
Are any of these variances getting close like the end of this month? Is there anything we could pull in
Yeah, that was going to be my next
Yeah.
question.
and do a late May meeting and then do the
Mhm.
June?
Mhm.
Not that I'm aware of. Also, we've extended the time that we have to get agenda items in. So it's 8 business days before. So it's more than a week ahead. So that
Yeah.
makes it complicated for staff. It's sort of like you finish with one meeting and then you're doing the next meeting and then you're doing,
Right.
so they, just timing wise, it makes it kind of difficult.
If we need to be flexible though, we could, right? For
Mhm.
these couple of meetings with staff. Maybe it's not 8 days, maybe
I
it's
mean,
4. or
I don't
3.
get to make up that
Yeah,
schedule.
right,
It would be
right.
a clerk and town manager
Right.
decision.
Okay.
Okay, so if we needed to meet on the 23rd or the 30th of May, could everyone do that?
I could.
I won't be here.
Okay, that's 2 down, 30th, but 5 in.
Yeah.
Okay, and if we were to have a second meeting in June on the 20th or 27th, would everyone be here?
Yes.
I
Yes.
may be away for that one. So
You may be
yeah.
away from that one. How about you, Doug?
Should be here.
Okay, and you?
I should be.
Okay, so that would, 6 for sure, 7 maybe. For a
And I would
second.
always attend via Zoom if that
Yeah.
helps. So
Yeah. So there you've got flexibility from us. And then if you have a meeting in July, it'd be on July 11th. And
Yeah, it
And
looks like
and
we'd
if
have
it
at
is on
least one.
July 11th, would there be a quorum?
unless somebody got sick, I mean, you've got Dawn, Jane and I out of town.
Okay.
And in the case of the chair and the vice chair being out, do the other 4 decide to, who gets to, who runs the meeting?
Chairs the meeting.
You would, in the absence of the chair and the vice chair, the remaining board members would appoint one of the
Okay.
of the remainers as to run the meeting. that
Okay,
day.
great. Okay. LPA items, Dawn, do you have anything?
no.
Patrick, how about you?
Yes. Just an announcement and also an encouragement that anybody that can attend the school district meeting this evening, please attend. School district should be voting on the options with regards to Fort Myers Beach Elementary. There was a interlocal agreement put in place that was negotiated with the town and between the town and the district. That's going to be presented this evening. That is implementing option B, which was the renovation of the historic building and a partial rebuild for additional facilities. We feel satisfied with the outcome as an ad hoc committee group and as parents of the school. I think it's important to have people show up because as things move having further discussions and potentially further negotiations into the future. So having a nice cohesive group representing the town would be a good thing. That's one item.
Will you tell where it is?
It's at the school district building on Colonial. The exact address I do not have.
Okay.
Meetings at 6 o'clock this evening. The other thing was, and Sarah, you can just give me a nod if you can address that when we get to your end. But I mentioned a few items that we had asked staff to look into. If you could give us an update as to where you guys stand on that and when we could potentially be looking at those items. That's it.
You want to wait and do, why don't you just go ahead and answer that
Okay.
right now, Sarah? Because I had that on my list also.
Regarding the FAR and whether it should count the lower floor, or I think that that's going to come down to a town council decision. It's been sort of back and forth regarding how that should be addressed. Some people said that it should be something that should be negotiable. I think that we're going to need a solid answer from council. They've made it clear that they're not interested in changing the FAR that is currently in the comprehensive plan. The way it's measured, I would like a more clear answer from how they want it done.
My understanding and some of the discussions I've had with the council members is bring something to us, bring us recommendations. So I procedurally, I'm trying to figure out how we get there, but I thought that's it. We make the request to staff to provide some analysis on the issue, provide maybe alternatives, and we make a recommendation. Because again, I don't want this to slow down the process. I think we need to address these issues as soon as possible. And I think the most expeditious way of doing that is for the LPA to take the lead and just make recommendations. And then council can make that decision, but we've got to push this forward.
So at the next council meeting or LPA meeting, would you like me to have a discussion topic that is FAR and whether or not to count the ground floor and advise you on how other communities do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think also we talked about possibly doing options where we, through a public hearing request, you can ask to have it calculated differently. So it's still.
How does that
provide-
work? You've said that several times now, Patrick, like either or, and I don't understand how that works or how that would work.
So right now, the FAR is capped in the comp plan.
Mhm.
However, the LDC defines how we calculate that FAR,
Mhm.
okay? A lot of communities do not include parking under buildings. In our LDC, we have a diagram that says anything under BFE, if you're using it for parking, storage, whatever, is calculated as a story and will be part of the FAR. So to provide relief to potential projects moving forward, we could make it where the LDC allows people to request that those parking areas are not calculated as part of the FAR. That would remain consistent with the comp plan, and there would be no need to change the comp plan.
So I have heard that. My concern with that is that when someone comes forward with like a CPD, they need to have some clarity on how that's going to be calculated before they get to the point of asking for those things. I think that for helping the development community understand what they're working with, we shouldn't really include that. We should have it, this is the way we count it. And you can ask for more FAR. Most of our zoning districts are set at a lower level than the comprehensive plan, but you can ask for increased FAR, but I don't know that we should change the way that it's measured.
Well, increased FAR would require a comp plan amendment.
No, what I'm saying is the zoning
zoning
districts
district.
limit below the comprehensive plan. So when you go to a CPD, you're asking to go up towards or hit that comp plan level.
Yeah.
So you can ask for additional FAR, but I don't know if we want to include also that we measure it differently. I think that just adds another layer of confusion.
Well, I think the confusion stems from calculating parking under a building where almost no other community does that. And I think the confusion stems from counting parking under a building as a story when almost no other community does that. So in my mind, correcting that removes the confusion.
But do you also, in addition to correcting that, I agree, we need to correct that if that's the direction that the LPA and the council want to go. I don't have an opinion. If that's the way we want to go, but also adding the opportunity to ask for things to be counted differently. Like, do you want the flexibility and a change, or do you just want a flat out change?
So let's say your future land use district caps it at 2.5 FAR. The change would be, in my mind, that the 2.5 stays there, but you can, through the plan development process, you can essentially ask for a deviation that the parking under the building is not counted towards your FAR. And again, if we think of anybody redeveloping the V zone, they're probably going to be 18, 19 feet up in the air. So we have a parking shortage on the island. So now we could encourage people to provide more parking underneath, possibly even exceed some of their parking requirements, especially if they're going to put restaurants that are going to be open to the public. So now the residents can go to that restaurant and know that there might be parking underneath, or we could just keep the restrictions as is, and what you're going to wind up is with very little parking. Because they're going to maximize the building over parking, that's for sure. So
I understand what you're saying, Patrick. I think what is important to literally illustrate in this scenario is what are the ramifications of that change. So what does it look like? What does it look like if your 1 or 1.5 or 2.0 FAR is calculated from the ground, or it's calculated above parking? What does the building look like? Because that's the visualization that the community needs to know. The details of it, somebody like you or a developer needs to know, because it's instrumental to the success of the project. But I think the community needs to have a very clear idea of how that change will impact the island, because it will. Not saying I'm opposed to it. It will be.
Does it affect?
It will be.
You still have the height requirement, right?
Mhm.
So you still have the height requirement, so
Yeah.
how
So
will it
height-
change?
The difference is that height is measured from base flood elevation, whereas the way FAR is currently measured, it can measure below base flood elevation. So that floor of parking underneath can count towards your FAR, but it doesn't count towards your height, which is, an incongruency in the code.
So typically what you run into is the controlling factor doesn't become the height and the box that you can fit in there. It'll be your FAR or your number of stories.
The number of stories.
Where again.
Or number of units.
Someone could take that box if they wanted. Let's say it's 30 feet from base flood elevation, put one story that's 30 feet and have that same box. Technically, they could do it.
Yes.
People aren't doing it because they'd like to have multiple stories in that
Right.
box.
Right.
I'll try to figure out a way to put something together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And previously, Patrick, you had brought up the towers question.
The
Architectural
architectural
towers.
embellishments?
Yes.
Yeah, just,
So that language was removed from the code by ordinance 20-19. The language previously said non-habitable architectural appurtenances such as cupolas, clerestory, steeples can extend above the height limit if they don't exceed an area of 250 square feet. A habitable roofed tower up to 150 square feet, whether open-sided or enclosed, may also qualify as an acceptable architectural appurtenance and extend above the height limit. The reason this was removed was the way height is measured was changed. So now it is the average between the eave and the peak. Previously, it was the eave. And so people were putting towers up above or filling in space up above it. So they're counting their height limit at 35 feet. And then they had a full story within their roof that they were counting as not usable space, but then they were building it out. Essentially, we didn't remove the allowance for towers. You can still have an architectural feature. The difference is now you count the height as the mean between the eave and the top of the building, as opposed to just the eave and then put whatever you want above it. And nothing was counted. So you were just getting massive things above the height.
Okay. I'm not sure I fully understand that because these are exempt from the calculation, so you don't count them as part of the calculation. So your main roof is where you would, if you're counting from midpoint of the roof, you would do it from the regular roof. You don't count that little cupola on top or whatever as part of that roof. So that's exempted from that calculation. That's how almost every other community does it. If we had created some kind of a loophole for people to put residential up top, I would say, yeah, let's get rid of the loophole, but let's not get rid of the opportunity for architectural embellishments.
But we didn't.
But what you're saying is now,
It doesn't specifically say it. We could put it back in, but you would still measure the roof height in the same way.
which in my mind should not include the cupola. That's why you say these items are exempt from the calculation.
So you have them.
Yeah, so if you put a cupola, you don't start at the very tip of the cupola and then go to the eave and that's a midpoint. It's your regular roof, midpoint, and then the cupola is additional and it doesn't hurt you towards your height.
If LPA agrees, well, bring forward language changing that. I have no preference.
Yeah.
We
I-
need design.
Yeah, I'd like to see that because I think we're going to get more interesting design if we allow for those things.
The issue has always been making it non-habitable.
Right.
That's been the issue,
Mhm.
which is why the change happened last time. Mhm. Okay. Anything else, Patrick?
That was it for me. The architectural embellishments, stories, FAR, and commercial architectural guidelines also. If we needed to review that as a group, if we want to, enhance what we have, keep what we have.
I want to enhance what we have.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more commercial architectural guidelines. Sarah, could I just clarify? So for the next meeting, you will have the FAR stories, that calculation, all of that will be on our next meeting as a discussion.
For clarification, I will not be at the next meeting.
Oh,
Will somebody have that information for us?
We already have 7 items.
should we change our meeting date so you can be there?
Will it be on our second meeting in June?
We could potentially do that on the second meeting in June.
Okay.
Wow. So we need to plan for a long day next meeting,
Yeah.
is what you're telling me. Okay,
Okay.
clear the calendar.
Yeah. That's why I just.
7 hearings? That's why we make the big bucks.
Yeah,
And that's-
variances, special exceptions. I mean,
Special-
they shouldn't be anything above and beyond, but it is just a lot of cases.
Okay, no problem. All right, Patrick, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Jane, anything from you?
Nothing.
How about you, Doug?
Did we, in a previous meeting, we talked about native plant landscaping and percentages and stuff. Was that one that we asked staff to come back on and with some thoughts? I'm trying to remember.
I didn't have that one written down. We can certainly look into it, though. I have worked in communities with very high landscaping standards. And then I've worked in communities that want absolutely no landscaping standards. I guess the question would be, do you want me to provide ranges? Or do you want me to just provide language that if you're going to provide landscaping, because currently for residential purposes, we really don't require landscaping. I think there is an interest in requiring some landscaping, but I'm not sure how much. And I would hate to, compare you to a community like Naples or Marco Island that does have pretty intensive requirements when you're not as interested in doing something like that. What are your thoughts?
I guess my thought would be, I don't want to restrict landscaping to like certain types of plants or something necessarily, or make folks have to get some kind of community approval to plant a tree.
Mhm.
But I was thinking more in lines of encouraging more resilient plants, plants that don't need fertilizer, they don't need watering. I think about communities like Cape Coral where huge, enormous amount of infrastructure has been put in place simply to water lawns, which is kind of crazy.
It is.
And I know from my own experience, where I planted native plants on the home we had at Sable, it needed no maintenance, no water, no fertilizer, no pesticides, no herbicides, nothing, and it grew like crazy. Mostly I had to just keep cutting it back. So I think that's sort of what I had in mind, but I don't want to get into some kind of gated community type of landscape ordinance. That's be the last thing I would be interested in.
The discussion, I can't remember exactly how it came up, but I think, wasn't it through a plan development where there's a requirement? And then
Yes.
we had talked about, if we can enhance that. So I think it was really, again, with commercial
It
guidelines.
was
and-
John Richard's parking
Okay,
lot,
yeah,
his park.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it was associated with commercial guidelines and plan developments especially. And I would support that also for residential lots, not imposing requirements, but having guidelines. If people, at least if we can direct them to what Florida friendly plants are, that'd be awesome.
We used to have that tree program. Is there
We
any
still
thought
do.
process? There is?
Mhm. I mean, it hasn't been eliminated.
Yeah, I thought it has been eliminated.
Hmm.
Because I tried to order trees a long time ago and they said no more. But I think it would be great to implement something like that since so many people lost non-native, to create a source at a price that could be affordable for people to, bring more easy maintenance trees back to the island.
Yeah, this is a good opportunity to look around and you can see the gumbo limbos
Yep.
and
Yep.
those types of trees are kind of okay.
Yeah, my gumbo limbo is
My
thriving.
palms.
Yeah.
Non-native
Yeah.
plants are pretty much gone.
You
Yeah.
can take a water conservation approach too, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there's zero
absolutely.
scaping and
Yep.
no St. Augustine because
No,
It's so pretty though.
I know.
You know?
crabgrass, that's what we call it up
Pretty much
north.
dead.
I do have to say that one of the things that I heard when I got to the island were people complaining that my neighbor didn't put in any grass.
I
It's
don't
like,
have any grass.
well, it doesn't live very well here.
Right.
Doesn't do too well in the sandy.
No.
And I think of the money that I spent on grass. It's just
Yeah.
crazy. Crazy.
So yeah, I can certainly look into that.
Okay.
And I'll talk with Chad about the tree program, see where we are on that.
It might also be interesting to invite someone from the garden club to come because they could be doing some promotions and education right now.
And let's check into that tree program and see where it is and maybe educate the island about it, because I think it would be
Rexanne
great
was big on that.
to be able to
Yeah.
bring in more palms or whatever. I mean, I bought several foxtail palms and, they all survived. They're great.
Okay. Scott, anything?
I've just been getting a lot of questions when the comprehensive plan is going to be presented to us.
I had a meeting yesterday with the consultant. Eddie is out of the country right now for a family emergency, but is planning to be back by the end of the month. I spoke with the other consultant who's doing a lot of the work on the back end of it. and gave him some clarification on some of the nodes. We discussed specific lots and separations between the nodes. Also spoke about the marina. Moss Marina will be coming forward at some point in the not too distant future. We want to make sure that whatever we're proposing on the future comprehensive plan isn't too far off from what is being proposed, but we also need to be prepared if that doesn't move forward. So, we're kind of hedging our bets on that right now on how we put together the comprehensive plan in a way that will dovetail with what may be proposed.
Do we have a timeline for what this process is looking like moving forward? I know at some point we talked about opening things up for public input. And are we going to see drafts? Are we going to see like what should we be expecting in the next few months?
We are hoping to start some meetings. We're not sure if we're going to be able to get meetings going before the budget. We're trying to figure out timing on some of the meetings because once the budget starts, it's very difficult to get much else to happen. So we may wait till after budget. So looking at October potentially to roll out drafts and have more public hearings. And that way more people are also in town maybe. A lot of people are gone during the summer, so it's difficult to get public input. That was what we were looking at. We may be able to move some things forward sooner than that, but I'm not sure.
One thing staff might want to look into the Resiliently group, and I think the budget that they have, there's a portion of that 1.1, 1.2 billion specifically allocated to advanced planning and design. And my understanding is it's a percentage of the total, and Lee County feels like we probably won't spend all that money. So it could be one of those where it could assist the town with the comp plan and any kind of public meetings that we may want to have.
Do you know who is handling that fund?
Well, Kevin Ruane is the
Chair of the committee.
chair, and there's a website, Resiliently, that's available.
To piggyback on that, Sarah, the other thing in their recent town hall meeting here, they utilized this Slingo or some kind of thing. I thought that was fantastic. Now, the only thing that was a little questionable to me was who was participating. So I know that I mean, if somebody was watching that in Kansas, they could actually access that and participate as well. Not that that's necessarily a bad or a good thing. It just could potentially skew what you're, are you hearing from residents of Fort Myers Beach? Are you hearing from predominantly visitors or future investors, or who? How do you quantify your participants? Maybe that doesn't matter, but I thought it was really effective because you get a sense of you get input without the input being, and they could have even not shown the screen with the words popping up to further keep it pure. You weren't being impacted by public comment on your opinions, and it was very effective, I thought.
Yeah, it's called Slido.
Slido, not Slingo, Slido. Yeah.
That's a Slido.
Slingo must be something else.
Were they carrying the meeting online or something?
They did.
They did, okay. If you didn't do the meeting online, that'd be a way to control it. It would
Yeah,
only be.
that's true, that you could only be in the room.
Yeah.
But I think the online I think that there is benefit to that because, I mean, I think as we've seen in post-hurricane recovery, visitors to this community are as invested in our success as we are. So, yeah, I just thought it was fantastic. So it might be something to do as we go through these comp plan hearings to be able to incorporate the comments and folks being away. So, okay. Anything else, Scott? You asked one of my questions. Thank you for that.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. So Patrick covered that and you covered that. Sarah, you remember when I was on the council, I asked one time when we are like today, we had 2 CPDs that had previous approvals. So I was trying to find Spakowski's report from Margaritaville. Man, did that take a while to find it, but I finally did find it. But I really think it would be beneficial when we've got CPDs that are coming for revision to have background historical data for the members to review, because though I may know it, Doug might not. And it would just be, I think it would be super helpful, even if it was just not the whole context of the CPD, but just maybe something that was relative or pertinent to the request. Okay. And then second, about upcoming pending things that might be coming before us. And I've seen it specifically relative to Moss Marine. Having lived through Margaritaville, I can tell you that right now it may seem low key, but as things heat up, people can get very critical about participations or prejudices or whatever. I would just caution everyone not to make comments about anything that might come before us on social media, because it would require then for that to be disclosed in the course of a hearing, wouldn't it, John? I mean, and it just stirs up something
Yeah.
that is a slippery slope when it comes to voting. I've seen several comments about Moss Marine, and I worry about it. I worry because that's not going to be the only case. I mean, we know there's cases up and down the island, and I just think for us on this committee, I think it's, even if you're the project's #1 fan, I think it's important for us to keep our comments relative to those cases,
Open mind.
yeah, because, close to us. So, John, did you have any comment?
There's always an issue, and when we're dealing with projects that may come before you because of their quasi-judicial nature and the ex parte communications, et cetera. Plus, once you venture into the social media arena, particularly on items that are related to your position as an LPA member, and this applies equally to town council members. You have to allow all forms of communication in response to those comments. And you can't censor, you can't block people. And so, it has been my experience, particularly as with some appointed and elected officials who are more user-friendly with social media, that it creates problems. And there's already been a series of lawsuits, one that involved a prior U.S. president, where the courts have said that once you venture out into that social media platform, you can't censor opposing views. Just because you don't like the response doesn't mean that you have the right. It's essentially some of these, Twitter and other types of Instagram, they have become the new First Amendment location where people, exchange ideas, and you can't, as a government agency or as a government official, appointed or elected, censor opposing views. And so there's, it's been my experience that no good can come of it.
Yeah, no good can come of it. It's just,
that's just my view and my experiences. But each and every one of you is, free to obviously engage in those types of communications, subject to the rules of the road.
okay, I don't have anything else. Thank you all. Sarah, items for next month's agenda, we've already kind of gone over that. And so for our next month's agenda, provided that you don't call us and say you need us to meet again this month, we should plan for a full day. Okay? And if there is nothing else from anyone else, may I have a motion, please, to adjourn?